Well, good evening, everybody. Good afternoon. I don't know if there are any people for whom it's morning, but good morning to you as well. And welcome to our lockdown lecture for tonight. Welcome on behalf of Harif, which is the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. For those who don't know us, we are a voluntary group of 6 people actually, and our mission is to raise awareness of the history and culture of Middle East and North African Jews. If you'd like to join our mailing list, please do so at our website, which is www.harif.org. We also have our sister news site, which is Point of No Return blog, and you should be able to access it quite easily on Google. This session is actually being recorded. There will be a video of it available to Harif members, and it's also being live streamed to the Harif Facebook page. Now, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please do so by writing in the chat, which is usually found at the bottom of your screen. And we'll do our best to make sure your question is answered after the speaker has finished her presentation. Well, tonight I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Carol Castiel, who's joining us from Washington, DC. We are actually journeying to a group of islands, 10 islands off the coast of West Africa called Cabo Verde, or Cape Verde, Cabo Verde. They're under Portuguese control, I believe, yes? Are they now? No, they're not, sorry.
They're independent.
They're independent now. They used to be.
Over 40 years.
Right, okay.
Formerly Portuguese colony.
I stand corrected. They're formerly Portuguese colony. Carol is a journalist and broadcaster, and in fact, her day job, I think, is to produce a weekly current affairs program for the Voice of America in the English language. And I think it's true to say that she found her vocation when she spearheaded the recovery of Jewish heritage in Cabo Verde in the 1990s. And after years of preparatory work, she founded the nonprofit Cape Verde Jewish Heritage Project to honor the memory of the many Sephardic Jews who immigrated to Cape Verde from Morocco and Gibraltar in the 19th century. And she works on a pro bono basis for this labor of love. So without further ado, over to you, Carol, for what I'm sure will be a fascinating presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lynn, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. And I want to introduce also my colleague in Cabo Verde, our beautiful representative, Sofia de Oliveira Lima, who's with us. I'm delighted to announce. So welcome to you, muito bem-vinda, and whoever else can join us here from Cabo Verde. So let me start with the PowerPoint, which will illustrate the story of the Jews of Cabo Verde to the best of my ability. So I'm going to share the screen and make sure, is everybody, let me see, I think I'm supposed to do something with the, is that okay, Lynn? Or
yes, that's perfect. Just press slideshow, is that right?
Yeah, I'm looking, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just having to find that now. Let's see.
Go to slideshow. It's in the middle of the screen above the E of Cape Verde.
Okay. Let's see.
Straight above the E of Cape Verde, it's got slideshow.
I see. You are very true. Very right. Okay. Resume the slideshow. There we go. How's that?
Perfect.
Very good. Okay. So this is our little opening, and Lyn was trying to explain this tiny, beautiful country where it's located. It is a former Portuguese colony. It's been independent since 1975. And we wanted to show with this slide, the intimate connection between Portugal, Gibraltar, which I think should interest our English audience, and of course, Morocco and Cabo Verde. So that's Cabo Verde off the coast of Senegal, about 225 kilometers. We have it we have it magnified. You see all the different islands, 10 islands. And there's no question that the history of those, three countries are intermingled, particularly with respect to the Jews. We call it's like a crossroad, really, a transatlantic crossroad between United States, Europe, and North Africa. And I always like to start with these nice quotes, about why should we care? People say these people are dead. And, I think, as Faulkner said, the past is never dead. It's not even past. And I think, we do well to remind ourselves why memory is so important. Elie Wiesel and then Anthony Shadid, that there's nothing wrong with, clinging to memory. Let's see, or a certain nostalgia as a way forward. We understand where we're going when we know where we came from. And that's a sentiment I hear from many of the descendants of the Jews of Cabo Verde. So first of all, we have remnants of the Jewish past, because there is no practicing Jewish community in Cabo Verde as we speak. There are many descendants, of one of whom is Sofia de Oliveira Lima, our representative. She's a representative of the Wanon family, very prominent family. But what we have are remains. We mostly have cemeteries. We have this place named Sinagoga, which is a small town in one of the islands called Santo Antão. And we have really memories. And once again, we want to preserve these memories and hopefully help to fill in this missing chapter in Jewish and African history. And the reason why these burial grounds are so important is, I'm sorry about that, is because our own tradition, Jewish tradition, says that perhaps the most important thing one can do as a Jew is to honor the deceased. Wherever a Jew goes, he or she creates Chaver Chedisha, instead of a synagogue or a school. One of the first things one does, of course, in the Jewish tradition is create burial grounds. So the fact that the Jews of Cabo Verde, these Moroccan Jews, did that, to me, that was very meaningful. And Jews are just part of the larger multicultural Cape Verdean identity, which is really a mixture of Portuguese and European. You have the Portuguese colonials colonists who went there in the 1400s and established themselves. And then you have a mixture of Africans with the Portuguese, which is really what the Cape Verdeans are. And then these Moroccan Jews just help to add to that multicultural identity. The other reason it's important is Cape Verde is truly off the radar screen of the major Jewish organizations, and nobody was really picking up on this. So I felt that it was important to do so. Now, here are some common Jewish surnames in Cape Verde, or Cabo Verde, as they call themselves. You'll see all of these names, most of them are all Sephardic, and they all are reminiscent of the names we see in Morocco. From Anaori, Aldai, we have an Aldai family in Cabo Verde. One of our colleagues, Januário Nascimento, I'm not sure if he's with us. Ben Shimal, Ben Aros, Ben Ross. We have a famous singer called Gardenia Ben Ross, who actually sang at the Sephardic congregation here in Washington a couple of years ago, helping Gail Shirazi, our friend who's watching, helped to organize that beautiful event. And as you can see, all of these names are names you'll see in Gibraltar because of the Moroccan Jews. Now, to give you the sense of the origin of the Jews, there is something called a first wave, and that is Jews who may have gone with the colonial Portuguese, but at that time, they would have had to hide their identity. Don't forget the Inquisition. So they're not going to go around, with names like Levi and Cohen. Many Jews, as you know, changed their names, presumably in Portugal. But a lot of them were secretly practicing. So we don't know how many there were among the Portuguese, but there very, very, very well may have been some, but very difficult to trace them because by definition, they would be hiding their identity. However, and what the Cape Verde Jewish Heritage Project is working on is this second wave, that is the Jews who came after the end of the Inquisition. So we're talking about after 1821, when the Inquisition ended, and they came primarily from Morocco and, yes, Gibraltar. They were practicing Jews. They weren't hiding their identity, as you saw names like Cohen, Levi, and others. And of course, the history of the Jews in Morocco, I won't go into, over 2,000 years before the time of the Arabs. And then after the Arabs came, they still continued to live there. And the Moroccans gave refuge to Jews fleeing the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisition. So after 1492. Now, who were these Jews then from Morocco who went to Cabo Verde? Well, they were mostly male. And that helps to explain why the Jewish traditions were not maintained or passed on. Because as we know in our tradition, in the Jewish tradition, customs are usually passed through the mother, and one is considered a Jew if one's mother is Jewish. But in the case of the Moroccan Jews, some were female, but still they were mostly male. They were fairly well educated. They were interested in trade, in commerce, and they came from those cities, Tanger, Tétouan, Rabat, and what is now called Essaouira, Mogador, and of course, Gibraltar. Now, let me give you a sense of the Gibraltarian connection, because this is going way back to 1703, when British took control of Gibraltar. As I was told by the archivist, the Jewish archivist in Gibraltar, Mesod Belilo, he said, look, the Gibraltarians weren't looking to trade with the Spanish, their enemy, so they looked toward North Africa. And so at that point, they started trading with the Jews because they were most of them were the ones who were doing the trading. They were the merchants in Tanger, Tétouan, and all along the coast. So you have that connection with Gibraltar all the way back to the early 1700s. And in fact, the top picture is the picture of the Faro Cemetery in southern Portugal, in Algarve. So you also have the Moroccan Jews being asked to come back, to Portuguese territory by Marquis de Pombal, even before the end of the Inquisition. He said, I won't bother with, the church won't bother you. He sort of, again, this was what I was told in Faro by those who were taking care of the cemetery at the time. And so you have all these very Moroccan style, tombstones in the Faro Cemetery. So you have that, and then of course, Gibraltar. And Joshua Marache, the gentleman in the picture below, he was my guide when I went there in 2015. And again, told me this story, as did the archivist. And there you have the Jewish cemetery overlooking Tanger. So on a clear day, they did this deliberately. They built the cemetery on a hill so that they could see, figuratively, Morocco, the land of their homeland. So I thought that was very beautiful. So back to some other aspects of the project, and we're still in Morocco and Gibraltar. On the left is the former Minister of Diaspora and our historian, Angela Sofia Benoliel Coutinho. We went there in 2014, and lo and behold, he invited us, that is the Cape Verde Jewish Heritage Project, to organize a group of descendants to visit the land of their ancestors, that is, of course, Morocco. So that from that visit, we had a beautiful trip the following year, I believe it was, or maybe 6 months later, and a group of us, including Sofia de Oliveira Lima, we went to Morocco. So many of our descendants got to see Tanger, Tétouan, Rabat, and Casablanca, and even Essaouira. And on the right, of course, is our historian, and she is in the archives in Gibraltar with the Jewish archivist. And she has now written a manuscript, and we're looking to try to publish it. And there on the left, you see, that's, I believe that's in Tetuan. And we have our descendants, going through the tombstones, one of whom there is Sophia, exploring the tombs of the Moroccan Jews, many of whom bear the same names as their own ancestors. And on the right, we were in Essaouira at the synagogue, Hayim Pinto. Now, I wanted to bring in the Açores because that's part of Portugal, and there's another Moroccan Jewish heritage there, which connects with Cape Verde. You have the same Moroccan Jews, who most likely of Portuguese and Spanish, but perhaps more Portuguese descent, going to the Azores. And this is even before the end of the Inquisition. I think they felt that it was safer there, was farther away from the metropole. And I think the Inquisition caught up with some of them, but many years later, in the 19th century and after 1821, the same wave of Moroccan Jews went to the Azores. And you probably heard of Ben Saud, or Jorge Sampaio, the former prime minister, maybe it was president of Portugal. On his mother's side, he was Ben Saud, so he was of Jewish descent. And there are so many. I learned so much from this trip I believe it was I went there in 2018, and visiting this beautiful museum, Museu Hebraico Sahar Hassamaim in Ponta Delgado, San Miguel. It used to be a synagogue. There used to be 5 synagogues in San Miguel alone. And of course, what happens a lot when Moroccan Jews go places, or at least Portuguese territories, there's a lot of intermarriage. It's very hard to sustain Judaism. There's intermarriage and not forced conversion, but there's just assimilation. And over time, the Jewish traditions become diluted. And on the right, that's the Jewish cemetery in Ponta Delgado. And another territory where you find the same Moroccan diaspora is in the state of Amazonas in northern Brazil. And I went there just last year, right before the epidemic, thank God. And I met the beautiful Jewish community, most of whom came also from mostly Tangier in Morocco. And that's Rabbi Dahan inside the synagogue in Manaus. And Ms. Annie Ben-Shimal, I'm not sure if she's with us, but she showed me around. She's a wonderful historian, scholar, and teacher, and very prominent in the Jewish community, she and her husband. And she's in the Jewish cemetery. Once again, you see tombstones very similar to what we see in Morocco and in Portugal. And what we would like to do is eventually try to find out more ties, family ties, especially between the families that went to Azores and also the Moroccan families that went to Amazonas and Cabo Verde. We'd love to, jumpstart research on that. So why did they go, to the, oops, sorry about that. What were some of I can't see my own title. That's why I can't, let's see.
Why did they leave?
Yeah, why did they leave? Okay, thanks, because it's covered up with something. So the Inquisition was abolished, as I said. One of the reasons was maybe looking for greater liberty, rather religious liberty, Jews in the Portuguese territories, and economic stability. There were deteriorating, I'm sure, as you know, economic conditions in northern Morocco. There was unemployment. There was the Spanish-Moroccan War, which was not, the aftermath, which was difficult to come out of. And even some of the Jewish communities were targeted by, it wasn't not really anti-Semitic, but there were some, spasms of, when some communities would attack some of the minority communities. And I think that was also a factor in why many of the Jews said, let's go. We have skills. We can go to, in this case, whether it was Azores or northern or Brazil, or the reason why we're here, Cabo Verde as well. And then here's an interesting connection with Gibraltar. Now, the British and the Portuguese, as you all know from England, there's that very strong, long-standing alliance, right? There's never been a war between Portugal and Britain. And there was a very important treaty that allowed or that encouraged the British to go to Cabo Verde, a Portuguese territory. And we believe that was another impetus for some of the Jews, many of whom came probably from Gibraltar itself, the British territory. We know that because some ancestors of Sofia de Oliveira Lima's family, the Wanon family, one of the ancestors, Raquel Levi Bentoub, has a British passport. So some of them came really with British passports, which was really fascinating. Cape Verde, well, very interesting. Look at the position on the map. It was a very important transatlantic hub for trading. São Vicente, where there was a coal station. The British were involved with that. And many then fanned out to other islands, Santiago, Boa Vista, and some to other islands, Brava and São Nicolau. And as I said, we have the community in northern Brazil. Here's a picture of the Wanon family, the one from Sophia's family, and the patriarch and the matriarch, the circles. That's Isaac Wanon and his wife Raquel Levi Bentoub, and there are many offspring. And these Jews, they primarily engaged in commerce, import, export, agricultural products, coffee, and salt, pelts. There's a famous trading company, and it still exists today, JBC, João Benoliel de Carvalho. Shipping, the gentleman on the right, that's a very small picture of David Benoliel. He was a very important person in the island of Boa Vista. His parents, Abraham Benoliel and Esther Benatar, came from Rabat to the island of Boa Vista. And he was known as like the powerhouse of Boa Vista in the early 1900s. He was involved in shipping and all kinds of things. He was even considered more important than the Portuguese governor. Others engaged in colonial administration, the Benros family in the island of Santo Antão, but he operated in other islands. And of course, some obviously traveled to other Portuguese territories, São Tomé and Angola, where we also have many Jewish tombstones, which one day we hope to recover and honor. Again, as I said, there was so much assimilation because most of these Moroccans were male. Not all of them, but most of them were male, and they immediately assimilated. There were very few, there weren't very many Jewish women. I think they went there and maybe they were thinking they'd stay temporarily, but whatever reasons, they just began to assimilate. Don't forget, they were a very small minority. They were not persecuted as far as we know. In fact, very well seen by the locals. They were seen in a curious way. They were seen, these were educated people. They were also, fueling the economy with trade. And there was a lot of intermarriage. And that is why, you don't have any practicing Jews left in Cabo Verde today. But interestingly, very few baptisms. This is an interesting pattern that we noticed. So maybe the Catholic wife or, there was some sort of accommodation. So as I said, we have the names, a lot of memories, and the burial grounds as a result of this patrilineal descent. And no synagogues. But as I said, burial grounds were created. And as we are always reminded by rabbis, that is even more important than, than a synagogue. We assume they prayed, in homes or in other, local buildings. There is the town of Synagoga, as I said. Now, here's another sign of a Jewish name, place name rather, the town of Synagoga, and this still exists today. We're not sure, there's all kinds of theories that there was a synagogue around there, but as historians like to be very rigorous, and they should be. We don't know yet, and we're not even sure if Synagoga was meant to reflect the Jewish prayer, place of prayer, but it seems as if it does. But again, more research is needed. And now just a bit of a background about the project, the Cape Verde Jewish Heritage Project. I've been interested in going to the Cape Verde Islands ever since I managed scholarship programs back in the late 80s in New York City at the African American Institute. And that's how I got to know about the Jewish heritage through my students. A lot of them had Jewish surnames, you know, aside from Levi, there was Ben Shimal, Anaori. And anyway, that's kind of the origins of my deep interest, as well as the fact that I love Sephardic history and culture, and particularly Moroccan. Anyway, long story short, we just kept going and going, doing this on a volunteer and ad hoc basis. I was able to finally create this 501c3 here in the United States with the impetus of my colleague, Januario Nascimento, who I'm not sure is on this Zoom call, but in any case, I always worked with the local descendants. And long story short, we created it, and then we had to get to work. So we wanted to make sure we had permission. We signed, MOUs with various city halls because they're the ones in charge of the cemeteries. So you see on the right, there I am with the president of the city hall of Ribeira Grande. You'll see of one of they call themselves, the capital of Jewish Cabo Verde, because most of the Jews settled in this beautiful island of Santo Antão. And then you'll see later, many years later, in 2016, we were able to establish what they call an MOU with the national government. And that's our colleague, my representative, Sofia de Oliveira Lima, with the Minister of Culture, and the photo below. And then finally in 2017, through a lot of our advocacy, Cape Verde Jewish Heritage Project, we kept asking year after year if the government could maybe recognize the cemeteries as national historical monuments, just like the Portuguese have, I believe, and also the Moroccans, their Jewish cemeteries. And they did. They passed a law. So we're very happy because this means that there's legal protection for these beautiful remnants of the Jewish heritage. Now, we just want to talk about how do we get funded? Well, we have a lot of wonderful individual donors. We had several, a couple of fundraisers, one at the Moroccan embassy and Portuguese embassy here in Washington. But our major benefactor, and I'm proud to say, is His Majesty King Mohammed VI of Morocco. When he heard about our work in trying to restore and preserve the cemetery of the Jews of Morocco, he became very interested. We wrote to him, and we were very pleased that he offered a generous donation, which is helping to underwrite all of the physical restoration of the cemeteries. And at the time, the king was also restoring the Jewish cemeteries in the kingdom. So it was a very fortuitous timing. And you may have heard of S. Daniel Abraham, the creator of Slim Fast, the diet drink. But he is also a very important philanthropist, especially involved in the Middle East, in trying to forge peace between Israelis and the Arab countries and Palestinians. And his contribution is going toward primarily the research that our historian has conducted and part of the writing of the book. And we were very proud to have on our side as benefactors the World Monuments Fund and, of course, the U.S. Embassy of Praia, who in their own ways have made very important contributions to our research. Now, as far as the status of the cemeteries, they're located in Praia, Santo Antão, Boa Vista, primarily. Now, basically, you'll see some of the before and after pictures. We saw that the tombs were sinking in the burial ground in Praia, and you'll see the before and after in these other places. So there we go. In Praia, in what we call the Várzea Cemetery. Now, interesting, this is a Christian cemetery, but there's a little Jewish burial plot. Most of the Jews are buried next to each other. And as you see, these typical Jewish Sephardic tombstones. We were concerned, as you see, it looked like, and the dirt was going over the tombstones, and we were really concerned, myself and the other descendants at the time, Sofia's mother, Inês Wanon de Oliveira Lima, and Januario Nascimento. Many of us were concerned, so we decided we'd start with, the Praia Cemetery. And there you have the afterword. the dirt is a beautiful thing, the ground, but we were very concerned. And the mayor's office, the city hall, they came up with the blueprint, and we were able to, solidify the ground with these small pebbles. And we have a plaque, and we rededicated the cemetery in 2013. We had a ceremony. Let's see if one very interesting thing, while they were working on restoration, the city hall found this little tombstone of Jacques Azanco. So this was something, it was a discovery that they made while they were excavating. So it's a beautiful thing, and we were very proud of them. This is a picture of our delegation. We had a nice international delegation. Several people from here in Washington, or one or two, one of the descendants from Long Island, from the Wanon family. And of course, many local people, as you can see, the mayor here in the middle, and Sophia right next to him. And now I'm going to take you to Boa Vista, where the Benoliel family really made a name for themselves. So this is what we found in the early days of the Boa Vista cemetery. Very sad, very hard to see the degradation. However, now this is a partial restoration. It's still in the works. We're having trouble with the walls, so it doesn't look quite as good as it does here, but we are working on it. And we lost a year, of course, this year with the pandemic, but we are making some headway, and there's recognition at the city hall level and of course the national level of the importance of that. Speaking of Boa Vista, I wanted just to talk about David Benoliel, because as I said, he was just, the man of the island. And in Portuguese, he was known as Homem Bondoso, a very good, wise man. And that's a picture of him on the left in one of the homes of his larger family. He's the son, as I said, of this Esther Benatar and Abraão Benoliel. And on the right is the historic building in Salrey, which belongs to the Benoliel family. And we're hoping it'll be marked as a historic building, and it will always be preserved. Now, here's another interesting story, which I think is very, it exemplifies the sense of tolerance by many of these Moroccan Jews, which I think is inherent in being Moroccan or being Moroccan Jewish, because look, these are Jews from the Iberian Peninsula, many of them. They've lived among Arabs and others. They're very open. And I think when they go elsewhere, they have that sense of openness. At any rate, David Benoliel married a Christian woman, a very devout Catholic. Her name was Dona Bibi, from the Carvalho family. And he was so enamored of her, and knowing that she was very religious, he built her a chapel on the beach. So it's called Capella de Fatima, and it's on the left. That was a very old picture provided to me by Rafael Benoliel, the architect of the restoration in Boa Vista. But unfortunately, as you can see on the right, it fell into deep disrepair. And we were trying very much to see what we could do, our organization, but we just couldn't. We had too much on our plate with the cemeteries to try, but we brought it to the attention of the World Monuments Fund and others. At any rate, there has been a restoration, but unfortunately, it's not really, what's the word? It's not really loyal to the original blueprint. In other words, but it has been rebuilt at any rate. And now we're going to the island of Santo Antão, which is, as I said, the capital of the Jews of Cabo Verde, because from São Vicente as well, which is, the two islands are very close to one another. You have to take a ferry to get to Santo Antão. You cannot fly there. It's too mountainous. And so it's very remote. How the Jews got there, only God knows, obviously by boat. But anyway, this is a picture if you're on the ferry from São Vicente, because I hope many of you will visit in the near future or in the future when the health situation is much better. You take the ferry and there you see Santo Antão, and that's a picture on the right of the beautiful coastline. And this is a picture of City Hall, and on that street in the town of Ribeira Grande, down that street, or the homes, many of the Jews used to live on that street, and their homes are still there. There's one, the general store of Benjamin Cohen. The Cohen family was extremely influential. And once again, you know, we're urging the mayor's office to please preserve this building to the extent possible. Now it is in the private hands of the Cohen family. I believe they sold it, but nonetheless, there is interest in trying to preserve it. And here's the cemetery, Ponta do Sol, way back when I was visiting, just, you know, curious and researching in 1990 something. It was just, there was no construction around it, and you go inside and you see all the tombstones. It was very moving for me. And then a few years later, you know, you see lots of construction, and we're still working on how are we gonna, you know, try to save this beautiful little, you know, cemetery, the remnants of the Jews. There's inside, you can see beautiful tombstones in very good condition, but, you know, lots of overgrowth and so forth. So we said, let's do something about that. And there you see, after we got some, you know, work done, and again, thanks to His Majesty, the monies that that went toward defraying the cost of the physical restoration were thanks to him. And so there you see a lot of improvement. And there is another inside look at the restoration. And that, again, you see quite different. You see a lot of buildings, construction, so many years later. In November of 2018, we had a rededication ceremony. And this was the design of the local city hall. They designed a menorah for the patio of the cemetery. This was their idea, which I thought was a beautiful gesture. And then one of the other things our organization does, and we will continue to do it, we created plaques. And by the way, we used a firm in Liverpool, England. One of the consultants with the World Monuments Fund referred us to this company and Photocast in Liverpool. And we decided bronze because it's so, you know, strong and can withstand all kinds of climate and passage of time. And it was quite a lot of work, as you can imagine, on my part and the part of my colleagues. We wrote down the inscriptions on every tomb. We translated the Hebrew, thanks to rabbis and others. And we were able to make bilingual plaques and a tombs plaque, so that if you want to, you know, you look at the tombs and they're numbered according to each tombstone. And then a small description. Well, 3 paragraphs that tell the history of these Jews who came from Morocco and Gibraltar. And Frank is one of the council members. So, and they created this little, stand on top of for the plaques. And that's just a better view of the plaque you can see on the right. And another picture of the ceremony, we had the Chargé d'Affaires of the United States from Praia. This guy, the one to her left with the skinny tie, is the Israeli DCM from Senegal, and so many locals and other descendants attended, and other dignitaries from the government. And this was a bit, so that was Ponta do Sol. The other cemetery, Penha da França. So there's 2. That's why this island is very important. And this one, each one contains about 8 to 9, you know, tombstones. And this was right before we launched more of the, you know, of the restoration. And now you see a picture of the inside on the left, right before it's not the final restoration, but you can have an aerial view. And on the right, we were restoring this part of this cemetery, the second part of that day. We went to Penha da França, and we had the rabbi from Lisbon who chanted prayers. And I wanted to give you a video of that, but I couldn't find it in time for the program. But you see, we have a dedication plaque, and the door has been restored, the entranceway. And that's a nice picture of inside. This is a little, very intimate cemetery. It's among homes, and the people in the village, you know, very respectful, of the cemetery. And we have the same bronze plaques, which correspond to the names of those buried there. And that's just another view of the plaques. And that on the left is the rabbi looking at them, and then on the right is a local, two Cape Verdean from Santo Antão. And that's another view of Peña da França. You can see your walk there, and you see how it is among the houses. And another inside view of our ceremony on the right. And now we're going to go to talk about some of the people. On the left is an old picture, an older picture of Rafael Ben Oliel, the architect. The Ben Oliel family, as I said, very prominent in the country, particularly in Boa Vista. He's one of the great nephews of David Ben Oliel. And on the right, we have him, a more recent picture. And this is in Portugal, in Lisbon. And I'm in the middle. And then on the right is our historian. And then once again, some descendant. And by the way, Angela Sofia Ben Oliel Coutinho, as you can see from her name, she is a member of the Ben Oliel family. She's also a descendant from one of the brothers, Abraham. No, she's a descendant of the Abraham Ben Oliel side of the family. And this is Fernanda Levi, living in Lisbon. Unfortunately, she has since passed away, a very proud descendant of the Levi family. And more descendants. In the middle is Edgar Wanon. He's really a legend. Unfortunately, he also passed away, but he was had a very ripe old age in his mid-90s. And on his left, our right is we call her Alicinha. I almost forgot her full name. It's Raquel Alice Cohen, and she is a combination of every family you can imagine. There's a lot of intermarriage among the families. So even though there was intermarriage with the Catholics, the Jews also tried to the best of their ability to remain among themselves. The Cohens married with the Pintos, with the Ben Oliels, with the Levis, and so forth. Edgar, a very funny story, because he was in his 70s before he realized that maybe he should convert. Now, when I say this to you, I'm talking exactly what you're thinking. He was studying with a rabbi. He was married to one of his distant cousins who was a devout Catholic. And she kept saying to him, this is what he told us, you're talking about you're Jewish and you're very proud of being Jewish, your Jewish heritage. Why don't you just convert for God's sakes? So he did, and he studied with the rabbi in Lisbon, and he even got circumcised. So that's Edgar. And Alice, Raquel Cohen, she's her daughter has married a Jew, and anyway, there's a lot more Jewish, let's say, customs in that family. Speaking of which, on the left is Nuno Wanon Martins. He's a descendant. He's also part of our advisory board. He's in Brussels. He's a nephew of Raquel Alice Cohen. He's a Wanon. He's a Ben Oliel. He's a Pinto. Once again, very interestingly, he actually is Jewish through his mother. The line remained, but he never really learned about his heritage and didn't know about Judaism. So he decided to convert officially, even though technically he could be considered Jewish because of the matrilineal heritage. Nonetheless, and he did the same, of course, being younger, but in his 20s, he went through the conversion process in Lisbon, and including circumcision and so forth. So he's now living in Brussels. And on the right, we had this lovely ceremony in the Jewish burial plot in Praia. And you see the representative of His Majesty next to one of the Wanons, Shep, and then Nunu is next to him. And then we have a businessman, Moroccan Jewish businessman who came from here in Washington. Trying to remember. I'll remember his name in a minute. And here we have one of our board members, a very young picture of Dan Mariash, and you may have heard of him from B'nai B'rith International. And he met with the former Prime Minister of Cabo Verde, Carlos Wano de Carvalho Veiga. And Carlos is back in Cabo Verde. He was an ambassador here for several years here in Washington recently. And there you see him again. And again, just showing you the Moroccan connections. At an event in New York, you have the Carlos Vega, who was at the time of this picture, ambassador to Washington, with somebody you may know, Andre Azoulay, who's an advisor to His Majesty King Mohammed VI, who also advised his father, King Hassan II. And of course, he's very prominent in the Jewish community. He's very proud to be from Mogador, Essaouira. And this is a picture of Aziz Makouar, who's former ambassador of Morocco to the United States and a very good friend of ours, a Portuguese speaker. He was very instrumental, as was Azoulay, in helping us with getting our letter of request to His Majesty King Mohammed VI. And here's some more pictures of descendants. The Cohen family on the left. Unfortunately, the lady in the robe, she recently passed away, Tia Zelinda. And other on the right, we have Zelinda Cohen, who's one of her nieces. And on the right, the Ben Ross family. And the gentleman, very old on the right, you see, is still alive and he's very talkative, and he loves to talk about the old days and the Jewish families and how they were very friendly with each other and did a lot of business. So let's see. Wait a minute. Oh, okay. All right. And now, can you read me my header?
It's 2021 objectives.
Okay, very good. So anyway, we are trying now to, we had a lost year, as you know. Last year was very difficult for all of us, particularly Cabo Verde. They had the epidemic. They live on tourism. I didn't say much about the country, but I can say right now, it used to depend a lot on remittances. It still does, because most Cape Verdeans really live abroad. The country is 500,000 people, and at least 500,000 more Cape Verdeans live abroad, because life is not easy in Cabo Verde. Certainly it went through many famines in the early years. And that is partly why the Jews were very instrumental. They were known to help even during the time of famine, particularly the Benoliel de Carvalho, Miguel de Carvalho had stocks and import-export. So David Benoliel, these were, again, not exclusively, but they were seen as very philanthropic and benevolent, because Cabo Verde really was anyway, a poor country, but very resilient, very resourceful people, not unlike Jews, you might say. They just plow through, very dedicated to education, and they're very resourceful people. And nonetheless, tourism is very important. So last year was very difficult, but we're hoping to revive it. We're hoping that we will help them encourage more, cultural tourism, not just to the Jewish cemeteries, but obviously to the beautiful other historic sites, whether slave trading and the beautiful landscapes. But vis-a-vis our project, we need to finish restoration. We're still working on Boa Vista. There's more signage to do, even in the beautiful restoration work we did in Santo Antão. Same thing in Praia. We need to do maintenance plans. A lot of times in Cape Verde or Cabo Verde, you sign you cut a ribbon and, we think we're done. But that's when the work really begins, because it doesn't take long to start to fall into disrepair. So we're trying to inculcate the sense of, maintenance plans. Every few years there will be painting will be necessary, changing a door, a lock, or whatever. So this is what we hope to do. We're hoping to edit and publish a book in Portuguese this year. We're working on that right as we speak with a Cape Verdean publisher. And there's even tombstones in other islands they're just sort of stray tombstones in the Christian cemeteries, for example, in São Nicolau. So we'd like to get to that, if not this year, maybe early next year. So once again, maintenance for the cemeteries. We want to help produce booklets for people like yourselves, who hopefully when travel comes back, you'll be able to get on not just direct flights, by the way, from England. You know, there are direct flights. All of you looking for sun, you know, you British thirsty for the sunshine. We see lots of direct flights for these all-inclusive resorts in Boa Vista. But we'd like to encourage you to take, you know, maybe you could take the charter flight to make it fast, but maybe stay in some of the local hotels, which are also beautiful. In fact, there's a hotel that they say was the building used to belong to the Ben Oliel family. But at any rate, we can get into that later. As I said, publish the book about the Moroccan Jewish presence and work on marking of other tombstones and places of memory. This is, again, a long-term project where, you know, the Jews, there's all kinds of buildings and business places where they used to work, you know, mark the building with a bronze marker or something, saying this used to be the place of, you know, of Levi and brothers, Levi Irmãos, and so forth. Again, part of this is the circuit of cultural tourism. So basically, I'd like to just conclude by saying, and I'm looking forward to your questions because I'm sure you have many. I left out, you know, a number of things, but we hope this is going to be an educational project. We want to educate you and everybody around the world, but also Cape Verdeans, to learn about their so-called Jewish rib, the fact that not just Portuguese and African, but in many of the Jewish, many of the rather Cabo Verde families, there's probably some Moroccan, you know, Jewish ancestry. And we want to preserve the memory. That's part of who we are as a people, but it's important for history to pass on this knowledge, to document it properly, as we're doing with the book and whoever else, other researchers, Cape Verdean or otherwise, because it is an unknown chapter in African history, in Cabo Verdean history, and also, of course, in our Jewish diaspora history. And of course, we do want to encourage cultural tourism. And in doing so, we will always count on our counterparts, our wonderful descendants and mayors, the government of Cabo Verde, civil society, and of course, international organizations. And there's one more nice photo of several of the descendants. This was in 2018 at the ceremony for the two cemeteries in Santo Antão. And that's it. And I would like you to please explore our website. There's lots of interesting tabs with a lot more information that I could possibly provide to you. There's a donate tab if you so desire. All the funds, you know, go toward our project and preservation management. I am not, you know, paid in any way. I do this as a labor of love. I'm still working at the VOA, but at any rate, so thank you so much for your attention, and I really look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Carol. Obrigado. That was absolutely fascinating and certainly very tempting. I'm sure a lot of us would be very, very inclined to take the first plane and enjoy Cape Verde. Yes, we have got a few questions. First of all, I'd like to thank Gail Shirazi, because without Gail, I would never have found Carol. So thank you, Gail. And she reminds Carol that the person she couldn't remember is Mark Avissar.
Avissar, yeah, that is right, Mark Avissar. We were very happy to have him, and he's also a donor to our a very valued donor. So.
Fantastic. Now, Lisette asks, how many Jews were there at, I suppose, at the height of, you know, the Jewish presence in Cabo Verde?
Well, that's a very good question. And I just want to also say, I see, in addition to Sofia de Oliveira Lima, I see our wonderful collaborator. He's on our advisory board, José Alberto Tavim, professor. He's with us. He's here from Lisbon. He's on our advisory board, and he's an amazing contributor, in fact, to the book that we are in the process of reviewing and hopefully publishing. He has contributed a chapter on the Jews of Portugal, because of course they're a part and parcel of the history of the Jews of Cabo Verde. But you know, I don't know if it's fair to say, I remember I asked our historian, you know, 100, I'm not sure if that's 100 families or, you know, 100 to 150 souls. Don't forget, they had families, they were constantly procreating. In fact, there's a funny joke that Sophia's a cousin, and unfortunately, I don't think he's here with us, board member John Wanon, who's the one who showed me the British passport of his great-grandmother or his great-grandmother, Raquel Bentoub. He said that thanks to the Jews, he thinks that they helped to populate the island of Santo Antão. So at any rate, so that's why the people of Santo Antão, they, you know, they don't have to necessarily be of Jewish descent, but they feel very close because the Jews were there in great numbers, the Levies, the Cohens, the Ben-Arosh, Wanon, Brigham, which is a name that we've found out is in Hebrew, it's Ohayon. So these are little details I couldn't get to you, but in translating the tombstones, this name Brigham, it's so you know, it must have been anglicized, but you know, it's Ohayon, which is very well known in Morocco.
Yes.
So, you know, so it was some in the hundreds, but so not a lot, not like the numbers that we saw going to the Azores or northern Brazil. They went in many larger numbers. I mean, don't forget the rubber boom in Brazil attracted many of them. So this is a smaller group, but they were nonetheless quite influential.
Right. Yes, and actually a connected question from Lisette. So these were all the Jews buried in the cemeteries, the Jewish men, but their Christian wives presumably were not buried with them.
No, that's correct. And that's another interesting question, and I'm not sure if I addressed it properly, but, you know, they, very few, you know, none of them married with the church, except for one, the Ben Ross family. And that's, each family has an interesting story. The Ben Ross family, which we think the name comes from, you know, Ben Arosh or Ben Arosh from Tangier. You know, they married, the original pioneer or settler, so to speak, the immigrant was, let's see, Moises then had Isaac had Alfonso, and Alfonso had the generation that I'm more familiar with, but I only know that generation from their children, one of whom just died recently. And I know that he told me that is Jacinto Ben Ross. Now, I know a lot of these descendants because they live in New England, and I visited them up there in Providence and Boston and so forth. And he told me that his father was forced to marry in the church. So that was the first story I heard of sort of coercion, a little bit of discrimination, but from the church, not from the locals. But then his brother contradicted him, said, no, they weren't forced, they wanted to do, you know, so you don't really know. But there was a certain amount of, but nonetheless, what I want to say is that, so they didn't really, some of them married maybe civil marriage, or just live together, you know what I mean? It wasn't necessarily formal. We have one of the families, Cohen. I mean, this is crazy. So let's see, the patriarch, let's see, David Cohen. I'm confused, but one of the Cohens, you know, he was already married. He was married and his wife was in Lisbon, and her Dona Luna. And she didn't want to go to Cabo Verde. He wanted to go. So he went, and I guess he went with her blessing, and he created a family, a whole new family. But he gave his name and even his, you know, he provided for the welfare of the family, the name, and he didn't, like, the children were considered his children, and not sort of, what do you call that, off, you know, illegitimate. They were considered, legitimate, even though maybe, the wife was, the official wife was not there. So there was, again, as I think I didn't make the proper connection. It could be just a Sephardic or a Moroccan thing. I don't know if I can envision like a German Jew doing these kinds of things. There's a certain amount of live and let live. And yet the ones in Cabo Verde, they really did assimilate. And this is very different from the group you see in northern Brazil. It's not that they didn't assimilate. They got along very well with the non-Jewish community, but there were so many more numbers. They were able to stay together. They created a school, a synagogue, in Manaus, and then of course in Belém do Pará. Belém is even bigger, but I couldn't get to Belém, but it's the entrance to the Amazon. So they all settled. Then they moved along the Amazon, toward Manaus. But the numbers, I think the numbers were in Cape Verde's disadvantage. There were just too few for them to stick together. And yet I still think it's quite extraordinary that people like Sophia and all the descendants, these younger generation, they're the ones who are helping us today to revive the memory, and with their parents, and they're very proud of that. And so there's something that remained, that this sense of Jewish, being part of the Jewish people, remained with these descendants up until this day, because otherwise you wouldn't have, this kind of pressure or this interest in preserving these, these monuments. And but no, there's, even many of the Jews, there are many more Jews in Cabo Verde than there are burial grounds or tombs, because of the traveling. Many were buried in Lisbon. They didn't, and these cemeteries were closed at a certain point. So that's why there is only about 30, let me see, approximately maybe 40 tombstones in the whole of the country. There is a female buried in Praia, Maria, Tarragano. Anyway, she's a daughter of, and she's kind of buried further apart, which is, I'm not sure if that was, it was deliberate, but that's true. It's the wives would be somewhere else,
right?
Or there's some, their spouses, or however you want to call them, partners.
Oh, you have a phenomenal memory for names, actually, even though you think you're struggling to remember people, but you seem to have a fantastic recall.
Well, anyway, I just remember the guy's name, David Jacob Cohen. He's the one who went without his wife and started a whole new family.
Right.
And then you have his sons, anyway, José David Cohen, and then I heard, these stories were told to me by then the descendants of these originals, which are stories like I would tell everybody, you cannot make this up. I mean, you can't create fiction more interesting than, these people, what they did. I only wish we had more testimony. I tried very hard to interview people. I used to interview people all along the years. Just whenever I had a possibility of traveling to Lisbon or Cabo Verde, I would try to talk to people. And I did record many of these. Now I didn't transcribe this. This could be for another book I may publish myself. Memories, firsthand interviews with some of the descendants, because the book that our historian is working on is much more archival research. What what brought them there, what did they do, and just very interesting and important history, but it's not so much the personal stories.
So Carol, we've got quite a tricky question here from Sarah. Were Jews involved in the slave trade?
Okay, let me ask, I'm going to ask José Alberto Tavim, are you still there? For me to, I'm not sure if José Tavim is there, because he would be able to say
See if we
more.
can find him.
Yeah, but I would say this, not these families that we're talking about, not that I know of anyway, because this would have been after the 1820, it was in the mid 1800s, sorry, the mid 19th century. So not this particular group of Jews in Cabo Verde, but just like any group, if they were the Jews, it's not inconceivable that the Jews were part of some of the slave trade in the earlier days.
We've managed to find Jose if he wants
José,
to. Jose. Okay.
você pode falar sobre. Estás aí?
Is he there?
He's unmuted himself.
Oh dear.
Okay, unmute yourself. José.
Hello? Nope. Put his picture on.
Let me see if I can find.
Picture. I unmuted him. He unmuted himself. Yeah, unmuted. Jose
Yeah.
Alberto Tabim is unmuted.
Yep.
Hi, José. Can you tell us? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay. I don't know where he is. He's José, você está aí?
You are listening now? Okay.
José Alberto.
Yes.
Olha, the question was the Jews in the slave trade. I said, as far as I know, this particular wave in the mid-19th century, all these families, we don't have any traces that we know of. But as I said, you might have a better sense of historically the Jews, prior to whether they were with the colonial Portuguese, to what extent they participated in any of the slave trading. Can you address that? Pode, yeah.
You are listening to me?
Yes, yes, we can hear.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yes, there is some documents that prove that they were involved. As conversos, because as conversos, they were like the other Christians, and they were businessmen. So, like the other Christians, they take slaves from Africa to Cabo Verde, and from Cabo Verde to America. Some of these families, they have relation with the Jews of Amsterdam. Sometimes the families are the same. But of course, in Amsterdam, they were open Jews, and in Cabo Verde, they should be Christians. But
right.
the traffic of slaves, it was in a normal traffic in that period.
Yeah.
Also, the most rich families in Cabo Verde, the Catholics, they were also involved. So all the people that have business in Cabo Verde, they traffic in slaves, most of them. So,
right.
Yeah, it's what everyone did.
Right, but again, I think it's important to underscore that. So this is a different generation. He's referring to the Cristãos Novos, the new Christians, Maranos, the Jews. So like I said, that kind of harks back to what we call the first wave of Jews that we have very little traces of, because they were literally hiding their identity. But I defer to José Tavim. But like I said, this later group who went, that we're documenting after the Inquisition ended, they were there. The slave trade was pretty much over, or that wasn't part of their business activities.
Okay, thank you very much, Jose. That was very interesting. And it's very exciting to have your friends from all over, from Portugal, from Cape Verde.
Yeah, and I see Annie Benchimol is here. I'm so happy to see her. She's my beautiful friend from Manaus.
From Manaus.
Yeah, she showed me all around, Manaus, introduced me to the Jewish community. We had a Havdalah service just last week on Zoom with our friends at the synagogue. I don't know if Annie wants to say something.
Hello, it's a big pleasure for me to be with you. And I'm very happy to know that people is also having fun with the stories that we live day by day. My great-grandparents were from Morocco, so I am part of the life, the part of the story that Carol was saying. So it's very interesting to watch from another point of view. So if you also want to know anything about our history here in north of Brazil, it's going to be a pleasure for me to tell you in a few words or anytime you want. I just sign in your page. So now we are contacted. We are connected. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, well, very exciting that we have Anne from Brazil joining us. And
that would be, yes.
Another destination for everyone who's desperate to get on a plane.
Right. Oh my goodness. And I'm so happy because what I really want to underscore is the interconnectedness between, between all of these places where these Moroccan Jews went in the same century, whether it was Azores or northern Brazil and Cabo Verde. It's all part of the same diaspora. It's just that it took different, different dimensions, each place, Cabo Verde being so small. But those Jews also, they were running around Angola, and we have 2 tombstones in São Tomé that I'm always asking a friend of mine there, are you taking care of Mr. Gabay and Mr. Cohen? They're in the Christian cemetery, because, they're certainly part of we consider sort of Cabo Verde kind of like the capital, but then they, from there, because that's where we see the largest footprint, so to speak, but they're in Angola, the Benoliels, the Cohens, and others. And the São Tomé, the small island, is a beautiful place. We hope to go back there, but we want to see if a researcher will take up the task of finding the family ties, among these families.
We have several questions for you, Carol, about whether you are connected to Portugal or Cape Verde. I know that your mother's English, so I don't
right, that's right.
there, but maybe further back in time.
Yeah, who knows? I'll have to take the the test, the genetic test, but because you would think so, but I really am pure Ashkenazi as far as I know, lineage. But I always say, in my heart, fi qalbi ana Yehudiya Maghribi, which is Arabic for, I'm a Moroccan Jew, or Sephardic, because I don't know how, this is just something that I grew up with. I was saying when Gail had the event at the synagogue, Magen David, we had it in 2018. We brought in the singer who was a descendant of the Ben Ross family. She sang in Criollo and even in Ladino. And the only thing I can say that you didn't say, Lyn, is that, it's just something inside of me. And, my family is, like you said, my mother's British. On my father's side, I think ancestors coming from Hungary and, like many people, the Eastern European ancestry. But I think going to Cabo Verde, which I forgot to tell you in the beginning, but only did at the end, my work as a scholarship coordinator for Portuguese speaking Africa, my first job out of graduate school, that just the links to the Cabo Verde, and I saw, these cemeteries and became very enamored of them and wanted to do something. So it's just an attraction I have. I'm drawn to Sephardim, I'm drawn to the Jews of Arab lands. And now, of course, Cabo Verde, because, the Cape Verdean people are beautiful people. When you go, you'll see what I mean. Very friendly. We call it Morabeza. And we can talk a little bit about that if you want. I don't know whether, I know Sophia, I'm not sure if she feels comfortable in speaking in English, but, there are many. Soon travel will restart for Cape Verde, Cabo Verde. There are going to be flights again. They have the all-inclusive beaches, but then there's smaller hotels, which I encourage you to look into. And we can talk about that another time. But yeah, so that's my background. It's just sort of adopted, an adopted heritage.
Right, there are 2 questions about inscriptions. Shula wants to know, how did they get the gravestones inscribed in Hebrew? And also there was another question from Tony about the engraver from Liverpool. Did you have more details about
yeah, tell me the first question again.
About the inscriptions in Hebrew.
Yes. Right.
Somebody have to come specially to...
Right. Well, this is what we don't know. I mean, this is what we're thinking, of course, back in those days. There must have been, either, I don't know whether from Morocco, probably the linkages were more with Portugal because it was a Portuguese colony, right? I think that notwithstanding their homeland, because you see on the tombstones, that's why the Moroccan connection is more than incidental. I mean, it is really the bloodline, because on many of the tombstones you see in Portuguese, it's either Portuguese or Hebrew, or a native of Tanger, natural, you know, de Rabat, you know, native of Rabat, you know, so they sort of identify with their birthplace. But since it was a Portuguese colony and they were all probably going back and forth to Lisbon, we assume Lisbon, you know, these were, they brought them from Lisbon already engraved or something in Hebrew, but they are in Hebrew, and it's and Portuguese. Sometimes the tombstones in Hebrew, I just literally had to take picture after picture. I sent it to one of Gail's friends, who's a Moroccan Jew and scholar in Israel. We had even Mark Avisar, you know, who's Israeli but Moroccan born. I mean, we just kept cross-checking, you know, the translations. And so and then Portuguese was old Portuguese, some of it was funny spelling, but we kept the original spelling when we made the bronze plaque. Now, we didn't do the bronze plaque in Hebrew. We figured, you know, the Hebrew, we just translated it to English. But the Liverpool company is called Photocast. Very nice. They just, the back and forth we had, I don't know how we survived. With, you know, just blueprints and sending back, you know, what do you call them, drafts constantly, because of course Portuguese for them, and spacing, design, it was thank God it worked out well. And and then
another question actually connected, Rosie Eschel, she asks, where can one find birth records for the early 1900s to 1908? Would they have been in Lisbon, or where would
you mean of for these Jews?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, again, you know, that's our archivist, our historian, Angela. She went into the archives in Cabo Verde. We even had to organize the archives, which cost us more money, which is why things were taking a long time, because the archives weren't even organized enough for her to go in and research. So we really. But nonetheless, she did do that and found a lot of, you know, those records. But, you know, we'd love to get the records from the originals, you know, and Morocco says that they don't have the records. I don't know if they sent them to Israel or where, but we thought we could get ketubas. We're still working on some of that, but we didn't want that to in any way delay, you know, publication of this book, which is mostly just a really good first look at the history of the origins and of these Jews and their descendants. But you know, if one wants to look, you know, you may be able to find, particularly in the Cape Verdean National Archives, and then Portugal too. We have some in the, what do you call that, Ultramarino. So I saw somebody ask a question and was wondering, my name, I know sounds Spanish, but my maiden name is Samuels, and I married a Brazilian Jew of Sephardic descent. His name is Castiel. So that's why I kept that name. And his ancestors came from Spain, but they emigrated to the Ottoman Empire, to Turkey. Mm-hmm. So Izmir, and so that's why. And I decided that even though we're divorced, I liked the sound of the name, and I started publishing, and that's why I use that name. And it appears that I have Sephardic heritage, but it's my own choice.
We did have a connection there. Anyway, I think we're going to have to close quite soon. I think there was one last question about, did Jews take refuge in Cape Verde during World War II? Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I do. That's a very good question. Yes, they did. And in fact, the Ben Oliel family, the mother of Rafael Ben Oliel, who is the architect of the blueprint for restoration of the cemetery in Boa Vista. I invited him. It sounds like he couldn't make it. anyway, I see Jose's asking a question. At any rate, I wanted to say that his mother is Neumann, and she's from Germany. So his mother's side is from Germany, and there was that sense of refuge. So that's another very interesting historical period to look into. There's probably others, but the most of the Jews are Sephardim from Morocco. But in that period of World War II, I'm sure there are several other stories, but that one in particular I know of. So,
That's absolutely fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very sorry that we're going to have to go soon. So,
of course,
it's been absolutely fascinating, Carol. Thank you very, very much. And I wish you all the best with your wonderful project. And I know there's somebody who wanted to talk. I'm sorry, we just haven't got time for this, but if you want to send a message to Carol, just send it to me, info@harif.org, and I'll make sure it gets to Carol.
Right. Some people asked me what was the website. This is the website, and the address is on the top line. It's CapeVerdeJewishHeritage.org. It's a lovely website.
Thank you. And my contact number there, we have little tabs. It says contact, and you can write to me from that address as well. I'm delighted to respond to anybody who would like more information. Thank you so much. I see so many Moroccan names. Yeah. I'm delighted, and all of our English friends in Cabo Verde and in Portuguese. Thank you so much. Muito obrigada.
And thank you to our very international audience for joining us. And I hope you will come to future Harif Lockdown Lectures. We have one every week. It's been a great pleasure having you all. And thank you again to Carol. Thank you. Keep well, keep safe,
so much.
And see you again soon.
And I'm just going to get everyone to unmute themselves. They will want to say their good nights in their own way.
Good night, Carol. Hi, Lynn. It's Gail.
Thank you.
Good
night, Carol.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you so much from New York.
Boa noite. Obrigada.
Obrigada, querida. Obrigada. Foi ótimo.
Thank
Sophia.
you, Carol.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you for
Please come back again.